Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Saints Insider podcast for Monday, August the 14th. Zach Ewing here with Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, and Jeff Duncan. We finally figured out, if you're watching, I'm hearing myself. Hold on a second. I was hearing myself twice, guys. Hang on. Okay, we're good now. I finally figured out how to get our names up on the screen, and then I got an echo. So we're tech geniuses. Jeff, you got to help us out with the technical part of this, man.
Yeah, just let me know, Zach. I'll clear it up with you. We'll meet later, get this worked out. Me and Rod both will take care of that.
Yeah. Well-known technical experts. Jerry's here. Our good friend Jerry says, "Great win Sunday." Look, I don't know about if there's such a thing as a great preseason win, and we'll dive into the Saints against the Chiefs. We'll talk about Derek Carr's brief but promising performance, and then we'll get into a little bit of the week ahead for the Saints. They're traveling to LA, as are Luke and Jeff on Wednesday for some joint practices and a game with the Chargers. So it is Victory Monday, says it's Poppy, but it's also like you got to kind of keep that reaction muted a little bit in the preseason. Guys, if you want our full reaction to the game, check out the Saints Insider post-game show that we did from the Dome yesterday afternoon. That's on these same YouTube channels. But in the meantime, now that you've all had a chance to go back and rewatch parts or all of the game, any more reactions? I know, Jeff, you had some stock up, stock down players on NOLA.com this morning. But what did you notice kind of the second time watching that game?
Well, I came away feeling less optimistic, after watching it. Obviously the starters looked great, but, the Chiefs, while playing the regulars, they were missing a lot of their star power in that game. They had no Kadarius Toney, no Isaiah Pacheco, no Chris Jones, no L'Jarius Sneed. Those are arguably four of their 7 or 8 best players. Travis Kelce was never targeted, played 5 snaps. So, I felt like the Saints should have kind of dominated the first string. But once they went to the backups, they were thoroughly outplayed, really pretty fortunate to win the game. And I'm sure that's what Dennis Allen and his coaching staff are talking about. I know that you always are going to have a drop-off when you go to the second and third string offensive line, but it was pretty significant for the Saints. I thought that affected Jameis Winston's ability to operate the offense and Jake Hayner's. They were under pressure a lot and really had very little time to operate. And I know Jameis had a really beautiful touchdown pass that I thought was the highlight for him. But after that, didn't really get much done, sacked 3 times in the quarter. So I came away with a mixed bag like you typically do in these preseason games.
Yeah, for me, I would probably – I don't know if I'd say I have a mixed bag. I tend to focus on that first unit in the preseason and probably – I mean, that was definitely a significant, I thought, drop-off, once you go to that second offensive line. And I think that's something that, I kind of talked about a little bit during training camp, and I thought we saw it yesterday. And they didn't look good. I mean, other than, I think the Saints probably should give Andy Reid some credit for throwing the ball on third down because they easily could have milked that game down to – it was a minute left when that happened, and they could have, run the ball there. And the Saints are out of timeouts, and they could have got it down to, 20 seconds having to punt and, then the Kansas City wins. But, I mean, obviously the winning and losing isn't the main thing in the preseason. So maybe that's not that big of a deal.
Look, the only thing that matters is Derek Carr looked awesome. That is all that matters from that game. Right? Like, if you take that guy and what he did in his first drive and plug him into the team they had the last 2 years, they're a playoff team both times. Right? Like, that is all that matters from that game. I'm not concerned. The depth, sure. You want to see their second and third teams play better, especially along the lines, especially considering the health issues this team has had the last couple of years. But, man, if they're getting, like, good to excellent quarterback play on a regular basis, which, again, remains to be seen. This is just we have a 12-play sample size here, but if that's what they're getting, I'm excited about this team. I really am. That alone can carry so much of the problems this team has had in the last couple of years. So I could care less about what happened in the second and third quarters as long as Derek Carr is out there slinging it now.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, okay, they're playing the defending Super Bowl champions, and they went starters versus starters. And like you mentioned, Dunk, that the Chiefs didn't have Chris Jones out there on the defense. I mean, they were missing some pieces, but they went toe-to-toe with the starters and outplayed them for half a quarter. But if this is the regular season, like, okay, it's 7-0 Saints with 7 minutes left in the first quarter. You got 53 minutes left to play against Pat Mahomes.
I mean, we don't know what
so,
kind of coverage they're playing, or I mean, I'm not going to
Right.
get carried away on that at all.
No, I'm not. But I'm not saying you get carried away. What I'm saying is, like, if they have their dude in there, like, you want to see him succeed. And even if he's not going up against the best players, even if he's going up against vanilla coverages, like, the bad thing would be is if he went in there and looked disjointed and it didn't look very good, right? That would not be, like, we'd be having a completely different conversation right now. So I don't care about all the other elements. I just wanted Carr to go in there and look smooth and comfortable, and I think he did. That's the most important thing.
Well, he looked a lot like he's looked in training camp, and I think that's a really good sign because we've seen that kind of efficiency and command out of him all camp. So it was good to see it carry over, no question.
Yeah, I mean, it's it was the preseason. The crowd interest kind of waxed and waned throughout this thing, but you did notice a buzz during that first drive when Carr is commanding the offense, and it was almost like, and that's why I kind of titled this podcast, it was almost like that. It was cathartic for Saints fans, like, oh yeah, that's what this feels like, to have a competent quarterback who can move the ball around. I mean, they haven't really had that since Breeze left, and you could argue Jameis Winston had his moments in those first 7 games of 2021, but I really think, Rod, it was like this feeling of oh yeah, it's nice to have a good quarterback.
Yeah, but like they were saying, I mean, it is the preseason, and you look back to last season. I think Jameis was 4 for 4 in the preseason. Andy Dalton was 9 for 9 in the 2 games he played in the preseason. So you do have to kind of put it in perspective, but you did see what you wanted to see as far as Derek Carr being able to go in there and mix it up. He threw the ball to 4 different receivers, I think, 4 different players. Kamara, Juwan, Michael Thomas, and who am I leaving out? Oh, and Kirkwood, Alvin. So I mean, he spread the ball around. He was able to work a bunch of different situations. I mean, they were able to work some goal line, obviously, after he threw the pass to Kamara. He had some 2nd and longs and some 3rd and longs after that false start on Trevor Penning. So they got a chance to work a lot of different situations in that 12-play drive. So I think all that was things that you want to see, and he executed all of it well, I feel like. And the one, he had 2 incompletions. One was to Chris Olave that was a drop. I mean, I think Olave should have caught that. He probably should have gone 7 for 8 on that drive. The only incompletion was the one he tried to throw to Michael Thomas there in the end zone before the Kirkwood touchdown. So, I mean, I think you have to be pleased with everything you saw out of Derek Carr there.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the most important position on the field. The Saints, I think, kind of showed everyone in the offseason they felt they were a competent quarterback away from contention, and so far, so good. But like you guys said, I mean, not to throw a wet blanket on anything. I know everyone's happy to win and see the ones play well. We got to see it in 4 weeks.
Well, I think the other thing that was encouraging is we saw some creativity in the offensive play calling from Pete Carmichael. I mean, they spread the ball around. They used some motions. They used a lot of different formations. I was as encouraged by that as I was the play of Carr. I think they're going to lean so heavily on Derek Carr at the line of scrimmage to get them in and out of the right play. And I think that's going to be a big benefit for this offense, because they really couldn't do a lot of that the last couple of years. And I think that, along with the creativity in the offense itself, should be very encouraging for Saints fans.
Yeah, I agree with you, Duncan. I think this is something that we've been seeing throughout training camp, right? We've been seeing them kind of mix things up a little bit on offense. You don't know if it's going to translate to the game, but these guys have speed at the skill positions that maybe more than I think I've seen on a Saints team since I've been covering the team since the 2018 season. Between Shaheed and Kamara and Olave and Juwan Johnson at tight end, I mean, they've got some explosive playmakers on this offense. I think we've seen them try to get those guys in space. They got Alvin Kamara in space twice yesterday, and it's been like this huge problem that they've been unable to solve for 2 straight years now. So I think the quarterback has a lot to do with that, where they feel comfortable letting those guys go out and try to create some mismatches. I'm really excited about what that can be this year. Again, got to prove it, but it is a really, really good first step. And I think this is something that we've been seeing throughout camp.
Real quick note on the rushing game. The Saints seem very committed to continuing the ground game, and maybe that was just the defensive look they were getting. But they did run the ball 28 times. Not a great per carry average. You're fine with 93 yards total most weeks, but a 3.3. And then on the other side, they gave up 4.9. Any concern there from you guys? A lot of that's backups, second string, third string, maybe even a lot of guys who won't even make the team. But typically you don't want to see your team out rushed quite that badly on a per carry basis.
Well, I think it was a little misleading because I think there was a 30-yard run by the fourth string quarterback. I know in the first two series when Mahomes was in, he had a 5-yard run. It was the longest run they had, and that was another scramble. So I feel like it's a little bit misleading the per carry average just because it was quarterback scrambles.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead, Luke.
I will say though that I am going to be concerned about this Saints run defense until I see it in action in the regular season. I mean, they got a huge test in week 1 against the Titans team that is always really good at running the football, and that was a weakness for him last year. And obviously the Saints saw it as a weakness, and they reshaped their entire defensive line. They were looking to get more explosive and get more, guys making plays behind the line of scrimmage. We'll see if that actually paid off. I think it's a little bit too early to tell, but it's going to be a concern of mine until they show that that's something they rectified.
Yeah, you had no DeMario out there either, and he's the best run defender they probably have, certainly on the second level. So you have to factor that in.
Yeah, and a little bit curious. The Chiefs didn't actually attempt that many runs. You even talk about late in the game, that third down. They didn't. Only 17 runs for a game is a little bit strange. But obviously, Andy Reid wanted to work on that passing game, and so and they were behind in the second half. If you care a lot about that, but they were going to throw. So a little bit curious. Any other final takeaways, Rod, from yesterday before we move on?
I know we don't usually talk about special teams a lot, but that punt by Blake Gillikin was. To me, that was like one of the things that just really popped out. Even when you watch the game,
Shake.
Yeah. Man, it went for 24 yards, and it probably went further out of bounds than it did up the field. I mean, that's how bad of a punt it was. And they have a quote unquote punt competition with him and Lou Hedley. So you want to see how that plays out. I think going to the game, I probably thought it was Blake Gillikin's job, but after he shanks that punt, you have to be a little concerned because that's really what got Kansas City going in the game. They were 17-0 at that point, and Shanks gives them the short field. They take advantage of it, and all of a sudden they start closing the gap. So I thought that was something that kind of stood out. I thought the defense played. We haven't really talked a lot about the defense, but I thought they played well. We haven't mentioned Trevor Penning's name yet, and he was a guy that I think we all were, outside of Derek Carr, Trevor Penning's probably the guy that we're watching to see how he does. And I thought he held up really well when he was out on the field.
Yeah, look, I like the obviously stopping that 4th and 1 was a huge play in the game, and that was the 2 defensive tackles they signed in free agency, Nathan Shepard and Colin Saunders with that stuff. Not a great play call. I'd throw that one out if I were Andy Reid. I thought it was a little getting too tricky there, but credit the Saints for getting the leverage at that. And I'll say one last thing. I mean, I watched Brian Brzee pretty intently on the rewatch. He did some really good things. You can see the explosiveness, kind of the violence with his initial step, but he also has a tendency, and it's one of the knocks on him when he came out of Clemson, because he's 6'5", which is very tall for an interior defensive lineman. He has a tendency to get caught standing up and lose leverage, and he got blown out of there a lot on run plays. That's something I know the defensive line coaches will work with him on, but at some point you're 6'5", it's kind of hard. So that's going to be something to watch going forward because it's very hit or miss with his performance.
Just going back to Blake Gillikin, I'm kind of wondering if he was trying. He was talking in his media availability the other day about learning how to hit the helicopter punts, which I can't remember who is the punter who kind of has started to do this in the league, but basically
Hecker, I think it was, yeah,
Johnny Hecker, yeah, and basically instead of the ball spinning like a spiral or end over end, it spins side to side. It makes it really hard to catch. I mean, he hit that so poorly. I went to a couple people and I said, was that the worst punt you've ever seen in an NFL football game? I'm just wondering if he was trying something new because it was so bad.
High school kids get yelled at for that punt, man. That was bad.
It was like he might have put that in the first row of the stands, honestly. I was wondering if he was trying something new because it's a preseason game and you can get away with it, but like I don't know if he can get away with it in that competition.
Yeah, maybe not. The other, I guess, good news. None of the first teamers had any sort of injury. They were in there a very short time, and the only really significant injury was Kendre Miller, who suffered a knee injury. And of course, you hear knee injury and running back, and you think the worst. But Kendre Miller reported today the Saints feel good about it. It's just a sprain, and they think he'll be ready, Luke, for Week 1.
Yeah, that's really good news. Look, we don't know exactly what kind of role Kendre Miller is going to play on this team this year, but I can say for certain that they need him for those first 3 weeks of the season, right, when Alvin Kamara is going to be dealing with a suspension. So really, really good news to hear about that. I still imagine, like I said on the post-game show last night, I still imagine they're going to be kicking the tires and some veteran free agent running backs. We saw it today. I think they're working out Darrell Williams. Where do you play, Rod? Arrett?
John Arrett.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John Arrett in high school and LSU in college. Obviously, guys played a ton of football for a winning organization in the Chiefs. And I imagine he won't be the only one they take a look at. So, it's something to keep an eye on. But like hearing that it's not a major injury and that he should be on track to play for Week 1 is really, really, really good news for the Saints.
I mean, we were talking after the game about free agents they would have to sign, Rod, and they have to go hunt for somebody really to fill those first 3 weeks. But that's kind of out the window now.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this roster. I mean, if Kendre's not back, I mean, you go into Week 1 with Jamal Williams and Ellis Merriweather, and that's pretty much all you have. And so they have to bring somebody else in, I would think, at this point. Darrell Williams, a guy who, I mean, if they're kicking the tires on him, I mean, he may be the guy they bring in. It's kind of funny. Last year he was with the Cardinals briefly, and he became the backup when Eno Benjamin went down, and Eno Benjamin's a guy who's with the Saints here this year, and he's out, and that's one of the people that's out of that depth, out of the running back room. So I think they're really going to have to find some help at running back at some point here in the next few days.
Yeah, and look, the Saints ask a lot of their running backs. It's not an easy position in this offense to come in and be a rookie. So I think they would feel comfortable getting a veteran. That's why they've been looking for veterans, even if Kendre Miller's back, just because there's so much they ask of them in pass protection, in the passing game. And, I mentioned it on social media today, but I was really impressed with Jamal Williams. You can tell that guy's played a lot of football. Blitz pickups were great. He knew when to release into the flat. He looked like a guy that's been in this offense for a while. And that's what you get with a veteran guy as opposed to somebody just coming in completely out of college.
Yeah, and I agree with Jeff, by the way. They're going to have her. Even if Kendre Miller's there for Week 1, I think they got to have somebody in this system ready to go as a third option there, because I think it'd be crazy to go into the season and just assuming Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller are going to stay healthy for those first 3 weeks. I think you have to have a backup option.
And look, we don't know anything yet about update on Kirk Merritt, but he's been working at running back exclusively. I know they're very high on his potential, but he's a guy transitioning from receiver to running back. So he kind of falls back into that same umbrella of inexperience. While he's got a lot of potential and talent, there's no question whether they want to go with him and Kendre Miller, probably not early in the year.
I know these guys aren't big names, but there are guys like David Johnson who are out there who was on the team last year who, I mean, he does know the offense. So, I mean, I'm like,
right.
Maybe that's a guy that you look at, or I guess Dwayne Washington out there if you really want to get somebody who knows the offense. I mean, he hadn't been very productive here as a running back, but, he does know the system. So I don't know.
I saw Divina Zigbo had a big game this weekend. Thought wouldn't be surprising if they called him if he got released before the final 53.
Round 3, baby.
I mean, you just need a body, right? Like you need someone who can get in there and knows what they're doing in case Kendre Miller gets re-injured or isn't ready or whatever the case might be. You don't want Ellis Merriweather to be taking important snaps as well as he played at times yesterday. Like that, I don't think that's what you want in the regular season.
Hands down.
So let's move on here on the Saints Insider podcast. If you are listening on the audio feed later, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us a 5-star review. Scroll down on your page, do that, check that out for us. If you're watching live, feel free to hit the like button on YouTube. Zach Ewing here with Luke Johnson, Rod Walker, and Jeff Duncan. Spin things forward a little bit, guys. This week, the Saints, they're off today. They practice tomorrow in Metairie, and then off Wednesday to LA for some joint practices with the Chargers, and then a preseason game next Sunday. So we kind of turned the corner from the dog days of camp into the routine of these preseason weeks. But these are big weeks, and you're going to get some practices ones versus ones for the Chargers. That means a guy like Trevor Penning gets to go against Nick Bosa. That means Derek Carr goes up against the number one defense. We get to kind of see Justin Herbert against the Saints' number one defense. Those are the days more so than next Sunday that I think will tell Dennis Allen a lot about this team.
Yeah, I agree. I don't even know if, I'm curious to see what Dennis Allen's plans are for the actual game, but I think, I don't know if we even see Derek Carr in the game this week, but I think what he does in those two practices that Jeff and Luke get to watch in 72-degree weather in California, I think that's going to be really big.
No bitterness, though.
No bitterness.
We're okay.
I'll enjoy this 107-degree weather in New Orleans.
You can stay in the air conditioning, though, at least next week.
I think we're going to learn more about the Saints the next 2 weeks than we did from this preseason game, to be honest with you. I think when you see ones-on-ones, good on good, especially this week against the Chargers, who, they were a playoff team a year ago, and they've got some elite talent. I'm not sure how deep they are, but, man, they've got some of the best players in the league. It's critical positions. I'm really looking forward to seeing, like, Trevor Penning go against Joey Bosa. You've got Khalil Mack on this team. You've got 3 big-time receivers on the Chargers, obviously an elite quarterback. So there's just a lot of things that I think we're going to see this Saints secondary, which is clearly the strength of the defense, going against that receiving core and that quarterback. I mean, that's really going to be fun to watch. And I personally, the one thing that I came away with in the preseason game that I was a little concerned with is I didn't see a ton of pass rush. They generated pressure with those exotic blitzes that Dennis Allen's so good at, but just guys winning blocks up front. You didn't see a lot of that. That was a problem they had a year ago. So that's another thing to watch in this practice. Can they get to Justin Herbert and really kind of alter his his ability to throw on time? Because that we saw one play, I think, the interception that Luke's boy Ugo Amadi got. That was a great example of what they're trying to get to, where they had a little pressure on the quarterback. Blaine Gabbert had to rush it. He throws it out probably too soon in the flat. Alontae Taylor gets his hand on it, and it's a tip drill interception. That's exactly the kind of thing they didn't get done a year ago. So we'll see if that carries over.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you guys just said, especially Rod. I'd be after the performance of that first team unit in the opener against Kansas City. I think they're gonna just look at these guys in these joint practices these next 2 weeks. Against LA this week and against Houston the week after that. Against 2 pretty good teams. I think Houston's gonna have a really good defense. Chargers, obviously, Jeff just went through their list of playmakers. I think they're going to get a really good eye and a good look at their first teams in those, and then use the preseason games for the depth for the rest of the guys and figure out who is going to make the 53. It would not shock me if we don't see the Saints starters again in this preseason outside of guys like Trevor Penning who need the reps.
I was looking back last year. I know that Ian Book, I think, played the entire second game last year. So you might see. I don't know if they use Jameis at all. If they just go Jake Haener the full way in the actual game this week or not. But it'll be interesting to see what DA says about the plans for
that. For those who don't know how the joint practices work, explain a little bit. I mean, Dennis Allen and Brandon Staley will talk early in the week. They'll kind of have a conversation about, hey, how much work do we want to get each unit? Is that right? And then they'll go from there as far as planning out these practices.
Yeah, it's kind of, it kind of follows the flow of like a normal Saints practice for us. Is we'll watch them do their individual stuff on their own off to the side. Both teams will kind of do their own thing, and then they'll get together for some competitive periods, whether that's 1-on-1, 7-on-7, full team, that sort of thing. But it follows the flow of a normal practice. They're just when they're doing the competitive stuff, they're going up against each other.
Yeah, they hash it out. The head coaches, what exactly how many snaps each side's going to get. Maybe if they do some situational drills, but it'll all be mapped out ahead of time. That's something they'll probably take care of today or tomorrow.
And the Saints travel Wednesday, those practices Thursday and Friday, and the game on Sunday in LA. I think it's 5 o'clock California time, 7 o'clock out here, I believe, is the game time next Sunday. One other thing I was going to mention, and this is the first year the NFL hasn't had separate cut down days for the roster. I was looking last year, it was August 16th. It was this week you had to cut from 90 to 85. Then you had to go down to 80, and then you had to go down to 53. This year, it's all in one go. I think it's August 30th. You have to go from 90 down to 53 before the season. Does that change anything in the way the Saints prepare? I mean, obviously, it's just 5 more guys. It gives those fringe guys maybe another chance to prove themselves. But is there anything significant about that change to you guys?
I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think those guys on the edge of the roster, like 86 through 90, I mean, your chance of making it probably aren't great anyway. But like you said, it does give you some other opportunities. But I don't know if it changes the grand scheme of how they go about these next few weeks. But
yeah, I think it just gives them all a longer time to evaluate, and that's all. I don't think it changes anything in a big seismic way. But I know it's something that I'm pretty sure that rule change was unanimous when they voted it in. So everybody just wanted more time, but I don't think it's something that has this big shift on the way they do business or the way they look at the team.
And look, I think you could see a lot in where the Saints are looking at the end of the roster, what positions they're looking at, just in the snap counts of this last preseason game. We saw, a lot of snaps for guys like Brian Edwards and James Washington, these receivers that are in that mix. Same thing with the reserve defensive backs, Lonnie Johnson, Ugo Amadi, like all those guys that are fighting for those final roster spots got a lot of snaps, extended looks by the coaching staff, because they're trying to evaluate those last 4 or 5 roster spots. Will they keep 6 receivers or 5? Let's give A.T. Perry a long look, and he got a lot of targets because they're trying to evaluate is their 6th receiver better than their 9th offensive lineman or their 9th defensive back. Those are the kind of decisions they're trying to make because they're going to have to get down to 53, and some of these guys they don't want to expose to the waiver wire.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Like who is like of those position battles that you're talking about, like who of those guys might get plucked up by another team? Like if A.T. Perry goes out and has another nice game, do you really want to release him and waive him and let other teams have a chance to claim him, try to sneak him on the practice squad? It might be hard. I mean, it happened to the Packers a couple years ago with Taysom Hill. They had a great preseason and they waived him and tried to sneak him onto the practice squad, and the Saints picked him up. And here we go 8 years later or whatever the case may be, 7 seasons later, he's still making plays for the Saints. So it's that's part of the calculus for sure.
Yeah, and that process will continue this week, and we'll reconvene maybe later in the week. Maybe we'll get, if you guys could get like the beach in the background, that would be ideal. We'll just stick it to everyone who's not there.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard this, Zach, but our place is like 2 blocks from the beach, so I'm sure we.
I did see that. Yeah, it shouldn't be a problem. You'll get like an ocean breeze in the mic. We'll have to put like a wind thing on the mic, and Rod and I'll be back in sweaty Louisiana, just hoping and wishing.
Maybe I'll drive over to Biloxi or something. I don't know.
We'll send a postcard. Put it that way.
It's almost the same. It's on Biloxi, Hollywood, Pacific Ocean. Yeah, we'll see. But we will reconvene later in the week. We'll talk about maybe how the first of those joint practices went and look forward to Saints Chargers. But until then, we appreciate you all joining us for Saints Insider Podcast. And I hope you enjoyed the postgame show as well yesterday. If you did not get a chance to see it, more reaction to the Saints victory over the Chiefs and how everyone looked for New Orleans in that game. Check that out on these same YouTube channels. And if you're listening to the audio version on podcast, just check out the New Orleans Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel for that video. But for Rod, Luke, and Jeff, I'm Zach Ewing, and we'll catch you guys next time.